Okay, a link to the meeting minutes is in the chat, and I think we're off. We've got Abhishek as well, and Vineeth, and Utkarsh. Good. Okay, so it was Wednesday the 3rd. Wednesday the 3rd. Okay. There were a couple of other, so we've got 2 topics. I suspect that'll take us not all of our time, and there are more things to talk about. One of those things that I was considering we might chat through is has to do with some work that I think Jagriti and Aditi, if I'm getting the names correct, we're going to work on potentially work on with respect to Meshery docs. This would maybe since I can see your face, Nivendu, do you mind pinging both of them to see if they might join? We might catch up.
Yeah. I'll just
Oh, thank you. And the release. Alrighty, good deal. Drew, are we ready for our first topic?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So, can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, so this all started when we were trying to document the whole APIs which we had for Meshery, right? And while doing that, we came across lot of things which we might thought we should make, we should regulate and make it more presentable. So, like when we created up, they are pretty good looking APIs, right? Like, so the first step which we have done over here is uh, I have jotted down every APIs which we have in Meshery, most of the APIs, and we have we have segregated them by categories, as you can see. There are a few things which are still to be done, like the descriptions and the parameters and how they are passed and stuff like this. This will probably be used when we are trying to document it by Ghostwagger. And for now, what I wanted to discuss was there are a few changes which we need to make when we look at the overview of how API endpoints are. Like one of the things could be like whether we want to use camel case or kebab case, because in few of the cases we are using camel cases, and in few of the cases we are using kebab cases to make it more. It makes sense to make it more consistent. So there are a few things like that, and general there are few endpoints which are serving the same things like API pref results and API slash pref slash result are basically used for fetching data, but one is used for getting a singular data and one is used for getting multiple. So that doesn't really make sense. So like finding this kind of things in API endpoints and like trying to improve them. So we are open to suggestions on what we, how we want to change it, how we want to, what we want to change. Like if any of you guys have work in any of the endpoints, it would be greatly helpful if you could like fill out the descriptions and how you are, what kind of methods you are using and the parameters which how you are passing them if you are passing them. Like that would be greatly helpful. If you don't, then slowly and steadily this sheet will be filled up eventually. Like no worries about that. And yeah, we are also planning to, as you can see, Lee doing right over here, we are planning to change few of the endpoints in a better way so that they reflect the particular category which they are in. Right? So yeah, that's from my side. If any one of you have any inputs.
Yeah, if I may, I wonder, are we trying to be um, as rest as restful as possible.
I
Meaning,
wouldn't say that. Uh,
hmm,
yeah, sure. Uh,
no, meaning, for instance, that we're sort of trying to identify the resources that we're the resources that we want to handle and be consistent with that. For instance, when I look at, but I'm not, I'm just guessing right now. If I look on line 34, I think, or yeah, line row 34, like, is this an endpoint that imports a board, or is this the endpoint for boards? Because
oh,
what I'm trying to sort of say, if we're thinking REST, then the endpoint would be, or the resource path would be just board, and posting would import or would create a board which would correspond to an import. That's a bit what I'm sort of trying to ask. And another one, for instance, is the query range.
okay. Yeah, I'm seeing what you're saying. We should probably do that too, like putting it all together in one place where if there's a get, we could get the results itself, and if we post, then we would post the results, something like that. Like this is a complete jungle right over here because few of them are restful per se, but few of them are not at all restful. Like they have different
Yeah,
endpoints for posting and for deleting and
yeah,
getting the
yeah.
results. So it's a mixed bag currently, and it makes sense, yeah, to bundle them all together to make them more restful, as you said. Oh,
So
so maybe
the ambition is, sorry, the ambition is to be restful.
yeah,
Yeah,
and for that we need to like see all the APIs one by one
yeah.
where it is not restful and change it accordingly. So the first step would over here would be to jot down what you want to change and where you want to change it. And yes, we should look at that too. That was a good input. Thanks for that. Okay, I can see some
Nice.
objectives
Yeah.
coming over here.
Yeah. Yeah. No, this, oh, Michael's spot on about kind of where he's headed, which is, I think I've felt slightly, like my OCD has felt sort of slightly out of whack over the last year. And maybe it's because of these endpoints, and it's just like, oh, they just grate on you. They're just a collection of 300 something contributors coming to work in various areas at various times. I don't know. Is it not that 300 people have touched the endpoints, um, but yeah, to Michael's point, what will really improve code quality, improve our conversations as we go to refer to something and call it something, our language will become easier. Is um, is when we start to focus on a noun and then to Michael's point, like restful things or HTTP verbs that you can perform on that noun. And as we do that, that will encourage us to have a consistent endpoints that you would expect you could apply a filter to, or that you could expect that if you do a post to, this will happen. If you do a put to, this will happen. And you come to expect like a fair amount of consistency across the methods and across like the query strings that are available. Like just the something for us to be using something like Gorilla or Mux or any of these frameworks, like other than routing, I don't know what advantage we're getting from them if we're not like I'm ignorant of whether or not they provide any additional standardization around things like filters. or provide a framework and an encouragement to have consistent behavior, they must, and we must just not be taking advantage of that or having enforced that in the past. Because yeah, something like, while it can be bothersome and a bit mind bending to give a little bit of forethought to something like Grafana, Prometheus, and if you keep going with what other telemetric signals there are, there are any number of others. Like anytime there's a bunch of this just makes me want to, I just want to throw up all over this spreadsheet. It just the reason being is like, you should really never ever, even when we're calling out Kubernetes down below, like Kubernetes, is it the centerpiece? Is it the rock, the center of gravity in the middle of much of what we're doing? Yeah. Is it, does that mean that things don't run in VMs and that we don't want to consider for things that are outside of Kubernetes? No, like we definitely want to consider for things that are outside of Kubernetes. Like 80% of the world's workloads are outside of Kubernetes, or 90%. So we definitely want to, people want to come to a service mesh, come to cloud native because they want to modernize their existing workloads and because they want to create new things. Anyway, my point is, even for as central as something like Kubernetes is, to have it, if you don't, Drew, if you don't mind, if you scroll down to like lines 50-ish or something where mesh sync is, I think this type of an exercise requires one to two, like between 2 to 3, and more can come to bear, but it requires a minimum one individual to go to sit to wear an architect hat, to sit here and say, let me digest the full extent by which Meshery wraps its arms around various infrastructure concerns, and those are concerns about itself, so system concerns. So why is mesh sync separate from the system? Like, isn't mesh sync a Meshery component? Why is that separate from this? Why is that not categorized under? And I'm not asking that at Druv or toward Druv in any way. And maybe it's fine. Like, it should be separate, and that's because we favor short endpoint references over hierarchical categorized things. That's a statement that needs to be made in the guiding principles, and like, it's not an objective, it's a guiding principle as to the design of something like this. So yeah, this thing is like, I've avoided having this, for my part, I've avoided having this conversation for a real long time, because it's like, look, because it requires a deep breath, sit down, think about it for a bit, and then well, this is going to sound like a bad kebab joke, but and then get fairly tighten your sphincter a little bit. Get kind of get boy, I'm not going to say the word, but be meticulous and scrutinize how, try to make it perfect, because else it kind of doesn't matter and it's haphazard. So for my part, to Michael's point, I'd love to see something like, no more, I don't know that we should ever reference Prometheus or Grafana. It's easier when you call out those things explicitly, but how many tracing programs are there? I don't know. There's Jaeger, Open Tracing, or not Open Tracing. There's Jaeger, Zipkin. Oh, there's a third one. I don't know. Anyway, are we only ever going to use Prometheus for metrics, or are we going to allow Datadog to plug in and get metrics as well? What about Grafana? Is that the only way? So why are we calling these things out explicitly in first class? Maybe we should, but that seems like they would be categorized under a /telemetry, or fine, let's just call it /metrics if just Grafana and Prometheus are going to be there, and then we'll have logs and tracing separate. So it doesn't take, yeah, anyway. Michael, this sort of, this is one of those areas that speak to some of your many strengths. Drew, this is great. Thank you for doing this. This is the first time I've ever seen the collection put together, someone to have organized them and said, like, I had no idea what methods were supported against what endpoints. And to Michael's point, like, it's egregiously wrong that we would have something like /Prometheus /query range. And I was there when some of the first ones were put in, where it was like /perf /result and then /perf /results. Like, that was dumbest thing when we put it in, and none of you were here when that happened, so it's okay to say it. Like, and I was sitting right there when we did it, and it was like, I don't remember the justification, but you all have been doing a ton of tech debt cleanup. Michael just published a post on that was basically like, here's how he and a collection of the rest of you went off and totally rewrote the adapters. And I sleep better at night because we're using a library for it. Anyway, point is, same kind of a thing needs to happen here, and it's a beautiful thing. It'll feel really good, and it doesn't. I'm expressing all this exasperation about the way that it's designed, and it's actually such a sweet opportunity. It's kind of a neat way to get in and wear an architect hat, kind of design a few things, engage with some others in discourse about like there's multiple right answers here. Yeah, let's we are going to get to logs. Like we've almost Vineeth had demoed to us a UI a little while ago that was showing like the ability in Meshery to have a tail of logs, like a live tail of logs coming from the meshes and the services. So we're probably going to deal with logs. Like that makes sense. And we'll probably we should absolutely be dealing with traces. So we can categorize things under this, / telemetry category, or not. It's correct either way. There's a couple of things that I think that should be given as some rules in part two. I'll take it one step further from what Michael was saying, and that is, rules like maybe just to make me feel better, is to never use a plural as we describe a noun, or always use a plural as we describe a noun. Could, kind of multiple right answers.
Yeah. Miles and miles of blog posts about that. Plurals or not plurals to describe resources in RESTful APIs.
What was the answer? What was the?
I can't remember actually. I think we used plurals, but I think the main point is choose one and stick to it. I think, but I think it was actually plurals if I'm not mistaken.
Quality, yeah. There's quality is consistency. Even if your consistency is kind of crap, it's still quality crap because it's the same crap everywhere.
Yeah, that's a good. Yes, and maybe another point that maybe you have discussed it before. Versioning of the API.
Yeah, it's a good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a couple of thoughts there had been in the time or two where others had mentioned it as well. Like, there's no reason not to put a V1 there, or an alpha, or a beta, or whatever there's no reason not to. Of when I think on it, or I can't say how many times I've looked at. I think other than the alpha, beta APIs of Kubernetes, because what is Kubernetes? It's not entirely just a series of APIs, but in part its success is built upon the fact that it has good APIs and the world's vendors can come to bear on those. But is that most of the software you look at, they'll have like a V1 API / V1 that was there from the start and has only ever been there for the last 10 years. It's like very rarely have I seen, sometimes you'll see them move to a V2.
But at least there will be, sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I think it will be because there are like 3 or 4 ways to version an API and all of them are wrong. Or difficult, like having it in the path, which is easy to understand, or you can have it in the header, or you can have it in the what's it called? The content type. No, what is it called? The schema. If you do it sort of proper REST and stuff, but I personally I think having it in the path is so easy to understand. One sort of approach could be that we would be going through the list and discuss what is actually the resource here that we're sort of like addressing. And then from there, what do you do with resources? Do you have sub resources, and how is the filter? Do they have IDs? How do you link resources? If you link any resources, and maybe working, taking up the Swagger or the Open API tool, or one of those tools, and sort of trying to specify it in there might help to wrap to understand it and have some help.
Like the action item over here, which I'm getting from your conversation, is maybe first define a few things which we would consider while constructing the APIs. We could like look at few of the good APIs implementation and like define that now we will use verbs. Like we won't use plurals itself. And once we decide, then maybe we could go through each of the sections one by one and decide particularly on that how we want to rechange it. Like if let's say we want to rechange Grafana API, we need to like go through each and every, like one person should know each and everything which is happening in all of the endpoints. So
Mm.
you would have a better idea of how we can change that. So maybe taking it one component by component might be a
Mm.
good idea.
And start with the easiest one. Which one is that,
Yeah.
by the way?
Uh, we can start with the recent ones, I guess, from pattern files. I don't know.
Yeah,
Or
pattern
Meshery.
files, because in pattern file we know what the resource. I think we know what the resource is. The resource is a pattern file. That's and then how do we sort of implement the functionality we'd like to that is listed in sort of like represented by the paths on the right hand side, and then think how can we, is this restful or is it not, and if we want to make it really restful, how should it look like? I mean, an import would be a post, and I'm just making it up right now. An import would be in post, and an export would be a get. And then where do you define the format? Like whether you want to have Cytoscape JS as format or something else. I assume this is it. Then look at how do you
YAML or
solve that
Cytoscape.
in.
Yeah, continue.
Yeah. And then you would use the what is it called? The media type, right? Or the content type and the accept type. That's maybe what I'm trying to. If you want to be really restful, or you would use it in the path. But that would be sort of like approach we could take. I think pattern file would be really good because it's well known and it is actually something we say this is we know it's a resource, a thing that has an ID.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds good. Like, uh, I I don't have much idea of where to look for good inspiration for API endpoints. Like, do you guys know anywhere where there are certain uh, set of rules people use for
Yeah,
defining APIs, or some place where I could look in?
yeah, I
Like
can have.
first,
I have to think a bit. As usually, I have books about stuff like this that I used to read, and we designed one. Tried once to design a really good RESTful API. We were not quite successful, I think, but this is not public. But I'm sure I find a public one that we can use, or if someone else has one. But I can have I think, if that's okay, I can get back to you. We can look at this together for one, if that sounds okay. And if it's not sort of like something that needs to be done by tomorrow, that would also be
no, this is a very low priority thing for now, I guess.
okay.
Yes.
So then we have a little bit of time. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. but I can have refresh my memory and look at the resources I used when we did that a couple of years back. I can share it with you and on Slack
Yeah,
or in a
sure, that
design
would be great.
document or here in this document as well.
you, Michael had almost been brainwashed. It had almost, yeah, yeah, definitely a design doc.
As long as
Slack.
it's not on Slack, because it
Yeah,
has
exactly.
an annoying sort of like, you remember, oh, we discussed this, and then you try to find it, and it's older than 3 weeks, and it's gone.
Yeah. That's exactly. That's exactly what I mean. Uh, that's fantastic. Yeah. To your guys' point, it's one of those things that we can continue to uh, we can continue to this is going to sound bad, but we can continue to perpetuate the problem. It's and it's mostly fine. Like, there's issues with it, but when we do go to address it, yep, hey, we'll want to have given a lot of thought and have a well-established system with design system with some kind of some rules, if you will, or some formatting rules or what have you, and so yeah, better to take some time with it and restructure. It's one of those things. In last week's meeting minutes, we sort of laid out high-level milestones for what the next set of releases might be, and I'll need to go look in the meeting minutes. But this is one of those things that it's like a pre 1.0 that we would want to, that we'd want to get to. We'd want to stabilize on the refactoring of these by then. Some of the way that so Michael's probably got a better response about like or more a better response about the design methodologies and how how you approach. One of the quick quips that I would offer is well, for me, it's not a lot different than how you might think about designing classes, like in an object-oriented piece of software. That you create a class about, or the way that you design SQL tables to be in like third normal form or something, that you would with those classes or those objects or those tables and the rest of the endpoints. These endpoints, what are they comprised of? Resources. So a resource, a class, an object, like those are all about synonymous with one another. And in my mind, they're really all about, to use a grammatical word to describe them, they're all about a noun, or a resource, a noun. So if you have a table, that's a resource, that's an endpoint. There's a table, that's a class, right? There's it has attribute, it has legs. Maybe legs are an attribute of it, or maybe legs are its own endpoint as well. So you want to create new legs or delete, like basically anything you want to do CRUD over. Those types of CRUD operations are very well aligned to RESTful HTTP verbs. And so, yeah, to have things like, so in under Grafana, like there's Grafana as a resource that Meshery is connected to. So it does make sense that there is a configuration, like there may be an API. Part of that configuration is what's its endpoint, what's its API key, and how many of these instances am I connected to? Okay, that kind of makes sense that maybe there's such a thing called config, or maybe it's just called Grafana. Like, and Grafana /API/Grafana, that is the config, that is the thing, the entity. When you want to do a get on it, you either get back the config or you get a ping, and maybe you get both. It would probably be you'd get a config, and when you do a post, you would create or update that config. When you do a put, you would that actually. I'm confusing the verbs here. I'd actually say it differently. When you do a put, maybe you're actually doing a ping at that point. Like the fact that we have verbs called out, kind of scan and ping, and then this range and stuff is or this query is like, you don't have to have a, like typically the fact that you're calling an endpoint often is a query unto its own. And so yeah, there's a lot to be reconsidered for here. The nice thing is that after the harder work of the intellectual work of putting thought behind the structure and kind of consistency by which it's approached, is that the work to implement is lesser. It's more about find and replace, in the code. And yeah, when things start to get described in Swagger, part of where Michael almost touched on, or was it kind of did, was in the Meshery architecture deck. That's probably that's the best collection of what would be our logical object model, which is to say there is such a noun, or there is such an object within Meshery called Grafana. There's another one called, like, what are these resources? What are these nouns? What are these endpoints? What are they, like? They're all, whether you're modeling it visually so that little brains like mine can understand that, like, it's okay for Meshery to connect to one or more Grafanas. I love to see that visually laid out, because just, it helps. Like, okay, that one's talking to that one, and it's okay that it's talking to more than one of those. Great. And then that directly maps to some, an exercise like this, which directly maps to something like a, Swagger spec, which then hopefully maps to importing into Gorilla, Gorilla or whatever we're using. And but those same artifacts are closely tied together, which actually then closely, like, identically maps to SQL design language, where you take that object model and now it's actual SQL statements that create the tables. And so maybe this is just the way that my mind works, but like I was saying, and then that directly maps to endpoints behind which you have objects and classes, that, like, these things all interconnected across the spectrum. Nice. I'll be quiet. It sounds like Michael and Drew, you guys were on a roll there with, some next steps and things.
Yeah, we can do that if that's okay with you, Drew. We sort of leisurely. Based on this nice work.
Hear you.
Michael was just being polite and saying, "Hey, would you like to hold hands for? Would you like to partner up and sort of?"
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
You have made good APIs, man. I need to learn to make good APIs. Sure.
It's like
yeah. So the first thing I should, first action item should be to have a good define a methodology which we would be using, and then implement in one of the easier section like pattern file, and then move on as we get there. Sounds good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me dig out some resources, and then we can discuss that, and then see how we want to.
Okay, great.
Proceed from there.
Yeah. And I think we have taken a lot of time on this meeting, so I'm gonna stop sharing my screen.
Alrighty, nice. That's great. Thank you, guys. That went so much better than I. All right, so Meshery div. Okay. Oh, gents, Alonso and Shubunk, do we want to? Is Alonso still on? Oh, yeah. So I'm sensitive to the fact that Alonso, Alonso and a couple of others, but Alonso specifically, like, he's put in a lot of work here, and he's done something that's not easy. Basically, the work that he's done is, like, touches all of the documentation pages. It's a change to the entire docs site, and it's a massive, it's an uplifting, and it changes the platform. It positions us for multiple languages. That the larger the PR, the longer that it takes to land, is sort of a natural thing. One twist that I'd like to It doesn't have to be thrown in and totally considered for, or rather, it doesn't have to be accounted for in this PR. But please do give this some thought, a little bit of consideration, Shubhank, now that you've been involuntarily volunteered here. Shubhank and Alonso, is as you set out, or as you kind of conclude on a system of multiple languages, there's another system that we've been missing. And Anirudh Jain has given thought to this. Shriti Chandra has given thought to this. It's versioning of the docs. Today, it's just assumed that you're running the latest Meshery, which is a fine assumption. Like if you're not running the latest Meshery, you should be. We don't want to spend time talking about older releases. At some point, though, hopefully it becomes important to people who've been using Meshery as a tool that they rely on to help them run this infrastructure. They're going to be concerned about what the differences are, especially the differences in behavior are between one Meshery version and the next. And so, long story short, this theme doesn't support versions. That's just like multiple languages it doesn't support, but you can build out a system to do that. It's not too. It's actually not tough to do multiple versions. So the thinking is, or my perspective is that when multiple version, that it's actually good to do multiple languages, because that's a subset of a concern of multiple versions. Because would you version the different languaged pages? Yes. Like, you'll have a version of the overview here in Spanish for the .5 release, and you might have a different version of that in Spanish for the .6 release. So those would be versioned like, so the versioning is a higher level concern. The versioning, by the way, is probably the answer here is just, it's just that we would take a snapshot in time. Like, hey, as we go to do this next release, we'll snapshot the current build of the docs and just save them off into a different folder, so that when people come here and they want to go to a certain version of the docs, it's just they're implicitly on latest whenever they come. And then the switcher, much like the language switcher that you guys were looking at, there would be a version switcher that is a top level concern. So that would be v0.5.0/ES for Spanish or something, like think about it a bit. What do we have left here, gents?
I don't know if it is the right time but I have to do to make a question about this documentation site. That is the permalinks. That I always thought of the permalinks also as a unique kind of identifier, so we can always identify the main English file, and then the the translated version of it, so it is more easy to track. And besides of the file name and the folder where the file is in, the permalink also give us a track of where the file is and where it does come from. But I've been talking with Chandra and also now with Shuhang, and they talk about translating the permalink also. So it's not only the content render on the page, on the body of the page, but also on the link on the well,
Yeah.
there. So what do you think about it?
Yeah, I think that Jekyll, yeah, it's a little bit of a conundrum, because it's true that one way of solving the issue is that we just don't use permalinks. Like, hey, the And if you don't use permalinks, that means that the structure, the folder structure in which you lay out the files on disk inside the docs folder itself, that if you don't use permalinks, that folder structure, it becomes a direct representation of like the information architecture that you have, the hierarchy that you have, in which like you have to have a concepts folder under which you would have an architecture folder under which you would have, and so we just have to be strict about adhering to that kind of a layout. If you don't, which I mean, we halfway get there, but everything doesn't always fit cleanly and neatly as to how you'd like to represent it here. So we do use permalinks to help us directly get to, get from one place to the next. The problem is, the challenge is that when you look at a given page, and here's a permalink, it's /concept/architecture. So if you look at where this sits, this does sit under docs, pages, concepts, architecture, and this is the main page, so it's just architecture. This permalink is a Jekyll front matter variable, and I've yet to see, let me blow this up a little bit. I've yet to see where it may require a little bit of work, because I've yet to see where you're able to take and insert, what's it called? Not Ruby, but the Jekyll macros.
Liquid.
Yeah, like liquid templating up in the front matter. I've tried to do it a bunch of different times for different things. It might be possible. Yeah, it's like, well, okay, well, if that's either that is possible, or we have to write our own liquid tag, or fine, every page has implicit JavaScript that looks at, it says, hey, what is this person looking at? What language is this person looking at? And by person looking at, that might just be, what's the current query string? Does it equal ES, or whatever the language identifier is? Fine, great. Make sure that we, in JavaScript, like redirect the window, or some solution like this, where you're saying redirect the window to ES/ whatever the permalink is. I guess what I'm getting to is like, yeah, it actually kind of is an issue, because the site itself will kind of override the language selector, because the permalinks assume a single language, and the default language in this case being English. And so it sort of assumes that the user is navigating to an English page. There's about 4 different ways to like address this issue. One, don't use permalinks. 2, have a JavaScript redirect after this, like I was just saying. 3, get liquid templating going on up in here. 4, just publish another copy of the site, like just like we were talking about with version numbers, where we have, like, we don't have to have a copy of the docs for every single little point release that we make. Rather, we need about 5 copies of the docs right now. One for the V010, V020, V0 for the minor releases, like the more significant ones. So we would soon have a 5th copy of the docs. Well, as part of that, I mean, storage is cheap, and this is not a big site. So you could also have, like when someone navigates to docs.meshery.io/ES or /whatever that, /language, that the site, the Jekyll, the site, when it's statically built, that it considers that all of the pages there, that they all consider that the root stops at the language barrier, such that, like, we're actually not changing the permalinks. It's just that the site and the folders, as we publish them, the base URL, like we end up every time that we publish the site, we would publish like however many languages we support. That's how many versions of the site that we publish, such that like you permalinks are they don't even know about language because they're always listed in they're always published in God, I'm missing the word. They're always published under a given language.
Oh yeah, okay. But more of the question, I don't know if I don't get the answer right, but more of the question it goes to that if is everyone okay for getting the permalinks translated also?
Oh,
Because there's the this language abbreviation like ES or EN, or Turkish will be TRs, etc. So that the permalink is stays the same, and then this abbreviation of the language is goes in the base URL, like you were saying. So Chandra was talking about translating also that permalinks, but then when we will be navigating on the doc side, well, the URLs will be different for every language. So that will be very difficult to get a track on the pages and check if the all the pages are right, etc., etc.
yeah, I was hitting the issue from slightly. So right now, when we're publishing a Spanish version, um, when you click on a page that has a permalink, does it, and you navigate from page to page, does it stay within Spanish?
Yeah,
Okay. All right. So then
yeah.
I was, okay.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah, I just was going to say that I put the link of the rendered preview on the document. So if you would like to see it right now. So it has the header also translated, and the right sidebar
Oh, okay.
too, and
That's awesome.
yeah, triple concepts also.
I'll toss out a quick vote. I'll toss out my quick suggestion, which others can vote on, and you guys don't have to take. But my suggestion would be, yeah, just leave the permalink in English, even though like, yeah, it's not as ideal for other. I mean, the other people just navigate the site here. They're like, oh, I would like to read more about adapters, and even though it's not adaptadores, it is in the URL. It doesn't matter that like it's not. I think we would be giving ourselves more pain than is worth. That's just my vote.
Yeah. Also, I second your vote as an individual vote too. But we I don't know. Chiwanka and Shindri could also give us a thought about it and maybe take a decision on it.
Sure. Hey, one way that this kind of a thing gets solved is like, is to go back to those individuals and say, yes, it is. So long as you'll provide a solution, we'll get that. Let's get that done. If they don't provide a solution, then like, the yeah.
Yeah, I think we should go with the non-translated version of Permalink now that we have discussed the problem, and it sort of makes sense for us to keep it in the English language itself, because the function of Permalink is just to like preview the structure of the website instead of focusing on the keywords of it, right? So now that I see the demo and the problem at hand, I feel like we should keep the permalink intact. So that's like my vote sort of thing. Yeah, we should keep it in English.
But I can see where you guys was suggesting the right thing just on the surface of it as you're reviewing a markdown file, and you're seeing, and it's supposed to be in one language, and you're seeing it, some stuff still left in English. It's like, hey, shouldn't that be translated as well? Like on the surface of it, it's like, yeah, it should.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Well, I'll let the. I think Shubhank, you had other feedback. Shubhank, looking for the green light from a peer reviewer like you on Alonso's good work. Are we ready for this, or
Sorry, could you please repeat, Lee? Sorry.
are we ready to? Is that PR mergeable? Like, are we? Did all of your inquiries get answered?
Yeah, I think one of the things, Alonso, that I wanted to highlight is that the issue that we were facing on the doc site is that whenever we refresh the page, it goes back to the English translated version, right? So one of the things that Lee highlighted was that maybe instead of having the root of the page directed being to the normal translated version, how about we do it the way that for English website it should be somewhere like en/en. For Spanish website it should be /es. So in that way, even if we refresh the page and if there is any sort of leak or anything, like the problem that we are facing in the 404 or like anything like that, so it will be redirected to the same translated language. I think if we try to go with this approach, I think the 404 issue can be solved in that way, right? So currently what the issue is, Lee, so like if we go on to a 404 page, the language is again resetted to the English part of it.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah. Has
Yes.
anyone ever called you a perfectionist, Shubhank?
No one as of yet.
So I'm just like, I'm going over here, A, B, C, D, E, F, and that page doesn't exist. Okay, so if that's not a good.
So
I
now
see.
the entire website is being translated back to English, though the header over there still has Espanol in it, but still the website is translated back to English. So I think this problem can be solved using that, setting a route back to the English, to the language header.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. No, I was just going to say that thank you for the review, Shuang. Really, really thank you. And yeah, let me explore on the 404 thing, so I can try something about it.
Sure, sure. And the other thing, I think that's not specific to Alonso's PR, but the the nav bar, the site nav bar, what it does is that if I navigate down to a page, let's say, to a link, and if I click on it, the navigation bar resets back to the topmost position. So like if you go to the most bottom link on the nav bar, right, left hand side nav bar, and you click on, let's say, the last link. So what happens is that the navigation bar resets back to the top position. So the thing is that if I am interested to, let's say, navigate to more links under the same subcategory, it sort of is very confusing because now that entire thing is lost somewhere because the page resets back. Sorry, the navigation bar resets back to its starting position.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that's a good item to create a separate issue on.
Yeah.
Nice. I think what I just heard is that we should merge the PR that Alonso.
Yeah, I think.
Okay. They're like two separate issues. The user experience one that you just mentioned, and then an investigation into 404 if something could be done.
I think that can be done in separate PRs. I think as of now, because again, the content and the length of the PR is also too much. So I think it's better to merge it first and then probably branch off from the merged thing.
Excellent.
Anything else today? Yeah, go ahead. Quick question, Abhishek. Any update that you'd like to give on? It's great work, Alonso and Shiva. Abhishek, update on some of the final tweaks on Mesh Sync.
Yeah, sure. So there's no much of an update, but the work is currently shifted towards the front end part, uh, where we are like tying off the backend queries to the front end elements, and yeah, basically it could be like basically you can uh, it will be available for people to test or in the edge release by tonight or tomorrow early.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. There's just one, I think some of you already know. It's worth calling this out. There's some of you have worked on various blog posts for this upcoming release announcement, and there's a pretty good one that Asuko and Michael have been working toward, which is I think it's sort of the main post, the main release announcement that it kind of looks like this, where it's sort of like it has the top level highlights of the significant new features and changes, but it has a lot of links that point out to either links to docs or links to other blog posts that go in depth on what is mesh sync, or like what is the operator, what is the. So not all of these. I mean, in an ideal world, we'd have one blog post per topic, or does anyone know? Because I actually don't know. Does anyone know where we're a blog post behind, or like where we would ideally have one, but we don't, but no one's working on it? I think it's probably this. Like what all happens in here is probably worth, and to be able to describe its behavior is probably worth, a feature post. These other items are wonderful, but not end user interesting necessarily. This is wonderful, but this is only if you're going to be contributing and extending Meshery. So pointing over to the docs maybe makes sense. This is great. Like we should have blog posts on. There's a couple of different Meshery CTL commands that, like, first of all, we should have a Meshery CTL. We have a Meshery CTL command reference. Great. And that should be auto-generated at some point. But we should also have a cheat sheet. The cheat sheet gives people more of a behavioral, like just like common uses and some behavioral tips. And we don't have those. So that's actually what I was going to bring up with Jagriti and Aditi, but they're not here. I'll bring it up on Slack, but that's an open call for anyone. The Vendu, I'm looking at, I'm eyeballing you right now.
Yeah, that's something I'm interested in. I will check with Aditya.
Now, this one, who all has seen this blog post? That's it's one for the record book, the history books, so to speak. It's one of those ones when people go over, they look at, they say, wow, what's the value of this project? Wow, there's 10 different adapters. I can't believe this thing works with all that. How do they do that? Okay. Yeah. We're a couple minutes over. Anybody have anything else? Good to go? Fingers crossed on a release. We should just skip to the .6 release at this point. I think we should just. Okay. Anyway, thank you all. Very nice to talk to everybody. Michael and Drew, very encouraged about your conversation. Guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Have
Bye,
a nice
everyone.
evening or day. Bye-bye.
Everyone.
Bye bye.
Bye, people.